Tombstone, Arizona. The name is synonymous with the Wild West. It started off as a small encampment that exploded with the discovery of the rich silver deposits that punctuated the landscape. This encampment was founded by Ed Schiefelin, who noted the striking colors of the Arizona mountains as he stood in Camp Huachuca. He mentioned to a soldier that these mountains looked promising for prospecting. The soldier warned him that the area was controlled by the Apache and that all you find in those hills is your tombstone. Well, he ignored the advice and hid out in the mountains, avoiding the Apache, and pulled some rich silver ore from the ground. After this find was certified, Tombstone was born.
Very cosmopolitan.
Soon people began to flock to the area in the hopes of striking it rich and pulling their fortunes from the dusty, unforgiving Arizona soil. The boomtown soon gave rise to saloons and gambling, along with brothels, and the growing pains were paid in blood. Tombstone became the town too tough to die. A quote from actress Josephine Sarah Marcus pretty well sums it up.
The grimly humorous phrase about our town was that Tombstone had a man for breakfast every morning.
More than nearly any other location in the Old West, Tombstone gave rise to legends and tales, which grew over the test of time.
Wretched slugs. Don't any of you have the guts to play for blood?
I'm your huckleberry.
Fanciful writers and eventually Hollywood would exaggerate these legends with fabrication and embellishment. However, there is a brutal truth at the heart of these legends. The truth is that Tombstone was the violent, final destination for many people.
You die first, get it? Your friends might get me in a rush, but not before I make your head into a canoe, you understand me?
And their shattered remains still lie in the Boot Hill Cemetery. It's no secret that tragedy can result in some tremendous hauntings. Tombstone is no exception. Many residents and tourists alike have encountered profound paranormal activity. It is believed that these hauntings are perpetuated by the very legends that used to roam its streets. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Hope you guys are doing great. Welcome to Season 5 of the Paranormal Portal Podcast as we start another season of these amazing adventures into the world of the unknown. We got a fantastic journey on your plate today, folks. We are welcoming Mr. Bruce Burnett, who is the founder of the Tombstone Wild West Paracon, and he is joining us to talk about the hauntings in Tombstone, Arizona, and of all the places that you'd think, well, I bet you that's haunted, you'd think of Tombstone. And so Bruce is going to bring us on a journey through some of the events and occurrences over in Tombstone, Arizona. So buckle up, folks. It's going to get spooky. Hey, Bruce, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on, brother.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure completely. And I'm really fascinated about the Paracon down there. Don and I and Sheldon, who are involved in the show, we enjoy going to Paracons when we can. And I did see that you were doing a Paracon this last May down there, and I almost went. It just didn't work out for scheduling wise for me this year, but I'm really excited that you're doing another year down there. Fantastic.
Well, absolutely.
Wow.
Of course, you have to come all the way from northern Idaho, which is, and we're only about 30 miles from the Mexican border. So you have a road trip to have to plan to do that.
Yeah, well, maybe I can chain it with some investigations on the way down and stuff, but it's fantastic. I think everybody obviously knows about Tombstone. It's one of the iconic locations in the Wild West and the history of America, but it's been full of tragedy and hardships, since its beginning.
Absolutely. Well, the town of Tombstone, many people know it because the shootout at the OK Corral.
Sure.
The movie Tombstone in 1993 was a big hit. It's widely considered as one of the greatest Westerns of all time. We just had a 30th annual cast reunion. It just happened this last weekend. We had like 10 stars from the movie were down here. So people are very familiar with that. But when I first started doing marketing with the city of Tombstone, we always get like the same crowd, and our crowd kind of gets older every year, right? Because my daughter, before I came to live in Tombstone, she had no idea what the OK Corral was. She was born the year after the movie came out. She doesn't know about the OK Corral shootout. She doesn't know any of that. And, the most followers we get on our Discover Tombstone page on Facebook is like the 50 and older category. And I was thinking about, Tombstone's super haunted. Like we talked a little bit about before about the show where we were talking about it. And there are locations everywhere in town, not just locations along historic Allen Street, but people's homes and the mines, all these things are haunted. And I thought to myself, why are we not promoting that?
Yeah.
We should be promoting that. And on Facebook normally it's 50 and above and 70% men that check out for Wild West stuff.
Sure.
The Paracon was the 20 to 40 and really the 20 to 50 range, and it was 70% females, a completely different demographic for us. So it works out really well.
That is fantastic. And I think it's fascinating. I mean, obviously you and I both are very passionate, and our listeners are as well, of the paranormal, but in a sense that paranormal is living history. I mean, those are in many cases historical figures, we assume. I mean, not that we know, but they are historical figures that are stuck in a moment in time, and yet that's still perceivable by us in the present. But I think it's a fascinating way, to intermingle both things, because I think the past is important to remember, but also the fact that some of the activity from the past still exists today. I think it's absolutely incredible.
Right. And we have a lot of buildings that exist from that time period. The entire downtown historic Allen Street is a National Historic Landmark as a brilliant example of, Arizona in the early 1880s. So it's very cool.
That is fantastic. So for you personally, how did your interest in the paranormal begin? Was there any one moment, like an inaugural moment into it for you? Did you have an experience?
The landmark moment?
Yeah. Was there one moment that really launched this passion for you?
There was. So I was born in Mesa, Arizona, but I grew up in Southern California. And I went to a party at my brother's house. Now, my brother was going out with this girl, and her name wasn't Linda. It was Lenda. And she was just, to me, was always a little off kilter. She read tarot cards and did all that kind of stuff. And I really wasn't so interested in that. But I went to a party at their house, and they lived at the top of these stairs, and of which they were the only apartment. And as I'm walking up there, this girl walks by me on the stairs, and I'm like 16. So I'm hot to trot for any good-looking girl I see. And she didn't appear, she wasn't like an apparition or anything. It looked like a girl walking down the stairs. Now, she was wearing a white dress, and she had blonde hair. And I remember I was looking at her, I'm like, man, I should have talked to her. But, she didn't say anything to me. She just walked down the stairs. And I went into the party, and I'm asking everyone, go to my brother, oh, my God, who was that girl that just walked out the door? And he's like, oh, I don't know. He goes, what did she look like? Because there was like 20 people in this apartment, a lot of people in the living room and the kitchen and the dining room and stuff. And I said, you couldn't have missed her. You couldn't have missed this girl. And he's like, I don't know. I didn't see her. And I asked several other people. Nobody's seen her. Then about 6 or 7 minutes later, a couple of my friends show up to the party. And my one friend, John, walks right up to me. He goes, "Who was that girl?" And I go, "Oh, did you see her down at the parking lot?" And he goes, "No, dude, she just walked out the door." And I'm like, "No, she didn't just walk out the door, because I've been looking, asking people about it. I would have seen her if she had come back in. I would have seen her." And then I asked Linda if she knew, had seen this girl. And she goes, "Oh, that's like Sally." And I'm like, "Well, Sally who? Do you got her number?" And she's like, "Oh, she passed away in the 50s. And I'm like, no. This was a girl that walked by me, a real girl. And she goes, "Oh, no, there's a girl that walks down the stairs all the time." She goes, but she's not a real girl anymore. She was a real girl at one time. And that really kicked off everything for me.
So she was as real as anyone else.
She looked, as I'm going up the stairs, I literally moved over to the side to let her pass. I didn't touch her. I didn't get touched by her or anything like that. But it just, now, granted, this is late 70s. And I'm probably stoned. So maybe she wasn't as real as I thought she was. But she looked real to me. Like, it wasn't like people talk about, "Oh, I've seen a full body apparition and it's very ghostly and it's very see-through," or whatever. It's a shadow figure or something like that. It wasn't like that at all. It was like walking down the street and having someone walk by you.
Man. So did you ever get the idea that she was consciously aware of you, or did she just kind of glance ahead and go? No acknowledgement? And you know
what? I really didn't get the impression that she was aware of me. I really didn't.
Okay.
And, what I've come to learn later is that it was probably some kind of residual thing, kind of like a VHS tape on auto playback or something, where it's the same activity happening at the same time.
Isn't that crazy?
All the time. We have a couple of those in Tombstone as well.
Yeah, I'll bet. If there's ever been a location that probably has quite a bit of imprints of the whole stone tape thing, that has got to be one of the locations, because the old West living was incredibly tough. These people didn't have the life that we have now and that we take for granted. They carved their life out of the world around them. Literally
carved their life out of the hillside of Tombstone.
Right.
There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles of mine shaft tunnels underneath the town.
Man. And it was
everywhere.
It was a silver mine, right? That was the big draw was silver.
Largest silver strike, at least for sure in Arizona. I know that. Yeah.
Wow.
Like millions and millions of dollars of stuff taken out in the 1880s, which, I don't know how much that is if you adjust for inflation, but
right.
It's a lot of money. Back then as a miner, you'd get like $3 to work for like 12 hours. So,
Oh my God. Yeah.
It's where you could go get yourself what we call a soiled dove.
Oh,
you could get a soiled dove for like $1.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
And if it was a streetwalker, probably less.
Oh man. Yeah, it was a whole different world back then, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
So it definitely left imprints on the land around it, but and I think there's the iconic known locations, like before the show, you and I were talking about the Birdcage Theater being one of them. And can you explain some of the events that happen at the Birdcage, or some of the claims that come out of there?
Yeah. So the Birdcage often makes top 10 most haunted lists. And as I talked to you before the show, I think it's because they do ghost hunts there every week, right? So thousands and thousands of people have been through the Birdcage, which is not true of a lot of locations in Tombstone, but so many people have gone through that they've gotten the moniker as one of the most haunted places in the country. Now, there is a gaggle of bullet holes in the Birdcage Theater. There are tons of bullet holes. You can still see them all over the place. there is a purported 26 people that got killed in there. I don't know how accurate the exact number is, but like we said, it was considered the rowdiest bar between the Barbary Coast and like St. Louis. Tombstone at one time was the largest city west of St. Louis in the United States. I mean, Los Angeles was a tiny little community, Mexican-American community founded there. And even Tucson, which had been there forever, Tucson's been there since the 1700s because the Spanish came up through this area. But Tombstone didn't happen until about 1877. It became a city in 1879. But the amount of, kind of death and destruction in the area was fairly dramatic. It's not like there was a gunfight every day on the streets, but there was a number of people shot because what we think of as being a normal gunfight, the old Gary Cooper, John Wayne thing where you'd go out in the middle of a street and the guy would stand, 20 feet away and you'd see was the fastest draw. That never really happened. That was not the kind of thing that happened. Guys were normally a lot closer to each other, like the gunfight at the OK Corral. Those guys were like 6 or 7 feet apart. I mean, they were really close.
Wow.
And most people you talk to, when you look at a thing like that, you're like, you mean you could miss someone that was only 6 feet away from you or 7 feet away from you? Wyatt Earp, the only guy not to take a bullet at the OK Corral incident.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else, even Doc Holliday, got nicked. He didn't take a shot to like the gut or anything, but Virgil got hit in the leg and Morgan got hit and Doc got winged and the two McLaury brothers and not Ike Clanton and Billy Clanton got shot dead.
Mm-hmm.
So it's never that tee off with someone in the middle of the street. That I'm sure that's happened in the Wild West somewhere.
Okay.
But it certainly wasn't the type of go around. A lot of people shot in bars, a lot of people shot in places like the Birdcage, like we were talking about, that type of thing.
Now, I was thinking about when you were talking about the Birdcage, you said there's lots of holes. Was the depiction of them in the movie pulling out guns and shooting at the ceiling, and like almost applause, was that a real thing that happened?
Well, the movie's a little bit off because at the point of the movie that they're all in the Birdcage didn't exist then. It was finished in December of 1881, even after the gunfight at the OK Corral. So, they've got the gunfight at the OK Corral happening in the movie right before the famous Vendetta ride where Wyatt Earp goes out to try and shoot as many cowboys as he can.
Right.
But my indication is that there are some holes in the roof from that. They obviously, the caretakers of the place didn't like that. But, when you've got a sort of criminal element, and believe me, there's still discussion in town on whether they were actually a criminal element or whether they were not. There's arguments on the streets of Tombstone about who was at fault for the OK Corral. Was it the Earps, doing their law-abiding duty, or was it the cowboys that started? There's a big mess about that. Even the two newspapers from back in the day, the Nugget and the Epitaph, one was like, it was kind of like comparing, in today's terms, like CNN and Fox, right?
Oh,
you've got
sure.
One that leans Democrat, one that leans Republican. That's exactly the way the newspapers were. So when you look up accounts of things in the Nugget, they were like a Democrat-led newspaper, and they have nothing good to say about the Earps. You look at the Epitaph, and they're like, the Earps were these law-abiding pillars of justice. And, the Earp brothers were not always the most law-abiding in their lives,
Yeah, I've heard about that, too. Yeah. That's the part of history, I guess, that's forever lost to history. But is the great discussion about who were the good guys really and who were the bad guys really. And it seems like it's pretty it's pretty obscured in history, so we'll never know for sure. Now, there were other locations there that you said were surprisingly as, if not more active than the birdcage. What were some of those?
Oh, well, the obvious go-to right off the bat, because it's a world-famous location, is world-famous Boot Hill Graveyard. And Boot Hill Graveyard, it's got quite a mix of people in it, but when they opened the Tombstone City Cemetery, which also has tons of activity because it dates back to 1884, there is a lot of activity in that graveyard as well. But at Boot Hill, you've got like the guys that were victims of the OK Corral. You've got other guys that were involved with shooting down in Bisbee. It was referred to as the Bisbee Massacre. Wasn't a massacre like you think about these days. I think 5 people got shot, but it was a massacre of its own, and they're all buried there. There's some law enforcement guys that are buried there. There are a bunch of kids that are buried there. There are regular people. There's miners that met their demise under, there was a lot of early blasts of powder. These are guys that died so quickly. They probably, if you die of an illness or a disease, you're sick for a long time. You can feel it.
Right.
You die from a mine blast that goes off early, you might not even know you're dead. Right. It's like it's that fast.
Sure.
And so that cemetery is full of a lot of different types of people. It's really common at Boot Hill to find there's these guys called the Brady brothers. They were like 11 and 12 years old. One drowned trying to save the other at the San Pedro River, which understand when I say the San Pedro River, this is not like a river like what most people would be used to seeing. It's more like a creek. They call it the San Pedro River, and when we have monsoons, it probably runs bank to bank, 10 feet deep, running 50 miles an hour. But most of the time, it looks like a stream.
Okay.
It doesn't even make it up to the 10 freeway from where we are most times a year, except in monsoons. But so it may have been a monsoon season when these kids tried to save each other. But there's a lot of like kind of sad stories. People get a lot of EVPs from the Brady brothers. Mm-hmm. There's also this kind of wandering spirit that we have that isn't associated specifically with one location, and we don't know who she is. She answers to the name of Emma and sounds like she's about, 7 to 9 years old. She's like super interactive. She's super playful, and she's super intelligent because she will straight out answer questions for you, which is, she's been at Boot Hill. She's been at Shufflin Hall. She's been at the Tombstone Cemetery. She's been at Wyatt Earp's Oriental. She's just been all over the place. It's not like normally you go to a place and there's a haunting and that one entity is always there. She seems like she's always there all over the place. So it's kind of interesting.
That is pretty fascinating. And it sounds like it would be incredible to investigate pretty much anywhere there. But what was the account in the movie accurate that Wild Earp did kind of take over a stake in the Oriental? Is that how he came about it? Or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's I don't know if the lead up with Billy Bob Thornton and all that, what are you going to do? Just stand there and bleed? I don't know if that's the way that happened, but Hollywood will do Hollywood. And honestly, and a lot of times, Tombstone will do Tombstone too. I've always said that there's 3 histories of Tombstone. My wife gave me this actually, and it said that there's the archive history, right? You can look up articles from, city council meetings and things like that. And that's one form of history. And that includes like newspapers, which of course, like I said, they didn't always agree on what they were reporting. But then you have the oral history, which is like the history that's been handed down for years and years. There's a certain kind of whiskey here in town. It's actually made by Jim Beam now, but it's called Old Overholt. And the oral history is that was Doc Holliday's drink. There's no way to prove that. There's going to be no, city council meetings or stories in the newspaper on what whiskey, Doc Holliday drank. Sure. But then you also have the movie history. And interestingly enough, in Tombstone, you could get all three of those in one conversation with someone and nobody finds it strange.
Yeah, I
mean, I find it a little strange, but
Well, I mean,
Tombstone's got a tombstone.
Even if you look at the action as depicted at the OK Corral, I mean, the variations of it are mind-boggling. It being like up to like a full day shootout kind of thing to, the more accurate, like 30 seconds of gunplay.
It was 30 seconds and 30 rounds. Wow. And that's the thing that's amazing to me. People that are standing 6-7 feet apart, 30 rounds, and Wyatt Earp didn't even get hit. It's like, Wyatt Earp never got hit.
Wow.
Never. In all his times in Dodge City and in the Vendetta ride, there is something with some historical accuracy, except for probably not where it was exactly, but where he gets into the thing with Curly Bill. Mm-hmm. Even according to historical things from guys that had been in that shootout, one guy that ended up dying who was a cowboy, the guy was like, I have never in my life seen anything like that. This guy walks out between two sides that are just blazing gunfire at each other, walks out to meet Curly Joe and blows him away. Wow. And that's why in the movie, wasn't Doc Holliday that really said this, but they said, well, where's Wyatt? And he says, oh, he's down there at the river walking on water. And the guy says, have you ever seen anything like that in your life? And he goes, I've never even heard of anything like that in my life. That was actually said, but it wasn't said by the guy that asked it. It was one of the cowboys that was dying that said that.
Wow. Yeah, that's
pretty
incredible.
Cool.
Yeah, he's a pretty charmed individual when you think about it. I don't know what the odds would be, but
he's had bullet holes through his jacket. Mm-hmm. When his jacket's like flowing in the wind, he's had his saddle horn shot off of his saddle. He used to say, it's not about being fast. It's about being accurate in a hurry or something like that.
Sure.
That's his quote. He's like, that half second you wait to take really good aim makes all the difference. So.
Yeah. And in all fairness, I've seen, there was a video that was out on the internet of, some highway patrol guys that had this SUV pulled over, and they were literally like 5 or 6 feet away from it, like three of them with their guns. And there was one armed person inside, and there was an interchange of gunfire. And I guess there was like 60 some rounds cast, from all the different guns, and nobody got hit. Nobody got hit. It was like, which I guess is probably
they need to go to the gun range. It's funny because when you talk about cops, it's like they do go to the gun range. They should be better aims than that. But
right. Yeah.
I'll tell you, speaking about the Earps, so one of the residual hauntings is someone that didn't even die here in Tombstone, but we think we know why he may be a residual haunting, is Virgil Earp. Okay. Now, Virgil Earp, they tried to assassinate him walking from Wyatt Earp's Oriental across the street to what used to be called the Double Eagle Brewery, but is now referred to as the Crystal Palace. And it was a super traumatic event in his life because he took like 3 shotgun blasts and he lost the use of his arm for the rest of his life. But, the theory is that because it was such a traumatic event for him is why there's a residual haunting. There's never EVPs. Mm-hmm. You can't converse, but literally thousands of people over the years have seen this person in 1880s dress, which is not unusual in Tombstone. So, I mean, 1880s dress is a lot of people wear that all the time down here, just like locals will go around in 1880s garb all the time.
Oh, okay.
But I knew a guy that was a federal agent for a while, and he's very trained for, looking at, being observant and all that. And he says one night, Wyatt Earp's closes fairly early. It closes at midnight. And he says, I'm walking down the middle of Allen Street because, we like to do that at night. It's nice and cool in the evening. You can walk down the street. And the middle of the street you can run into stuff there too, as far as apparitions and things. But he goes, I see this guy starting to walk across the street from Wyatt Earp's. And he goes, and I'm just curious because there's literally no one else on the street. He goes, so I quicken my pace a little bit. And he goes, and I'm going to get to the corner maybe 2 or 3 seconds after this guy gets to the corner. He goes, and I turn and look down the side, and there's nobody there. And he goes, there's no cars to hide behind. There's no building to duck behind. The Crystal Palace is fairly long on the side. And I said, well, was it a ghost? And, he was a federal agent. He goes, I wouldn't say it was a ghost, he goes, but I would say it was something that I cannot explain.
Wow.
And we get that fairly often. I've talked to marshals that have been called by people because they've seen people inside stores. The marshals come, they go around the back, they go around the front, they call the store owner to come in, they open up the store, there's no one in it. That's fairly common. I mean, it's not common like every day, but it happens, at least monthly.
Yes.
Where they're called to action and there's nobody in there.
Wow.
That type of thing.
So let me ask you, it was Morgan that died though, right? Morgan Earp?
Mm-hmm.
Did he actually die on the pool table in the Oriental? Is that true?
No.
Okay.
No. He got, I think that he died. Oh my God. It's either the Cosmopolitan Hotel or it was the Grand Hotel. He was looked at by the doctor who is like the first trauma surgeon. He was like the gunshot doctor. He was like really good at what he did, but he couldn't save him.
Wow. But it wasn't at the Oriental then. Okay. Yeah. Because I was just thinking of all
that whole thing didn't happen at the Oriental. Okay. That actually happened at a place called Campbell and Hatch, which is also considered to be haunted, which is now called the Red Buffalo Trading Company. And Campbell and Hatch was a billiard parlor with a bar. Oh, okay. And so someone shot him through the window. And also Wyatt Earp was there when it happened. Okay. And, the thought was even that they might have been shooting for Wyatt. Maybe the bullet, in flight turned slightly from hitting the glass. They don't know if they were trying to assassinate Morgan Earp or if they were trying to assassinate Wyatt Earp. But Morgan's the one that took the shot. Wow. And interestingly enough, so at that location where that shooting took place, the apparition that's been accounted as being seen many times is a female. So it's definitely not the apparition of Morgan Earp. But, the thought is, was it his wife going to look for him that night? And that's not what we would call an intelligent response spirit either.
Where would you find more of that kind of interaction where you can...
The 3 places that I've seen that the most are Shufflin Hall, Boot Hill Graveyard, and the Tombstone New Cemetery.
Okay.
And they're almost all associated with this girl, Emma. Now, could it be more than one girl? It could, but I look up stuff for Emmas. I don't find a lot of Emmas in the history of Tombstone. They're either too old or were babies or that kind of thing, but she is like weirdly reactive. I have to tell you this story. So I told you before the podcast that we were taking some teams into Shufflin Hall, which you can't normally get into. Oh, okay. But the city owns the building, even though kind of, you introduced me kind of as the founder. I mean, I am, but the event is run actually by the city of Tombstone itself. So our entire marketing team works on that. We've got a bunch of people that work on it. And so we take these teams in to let them, kind of as a give me because they're giving their time to come and help us out. Sure. And we let them investigate nighttime at Boot Hill and at Shufflin Hall. And this one team comes up out of the basement and they go, oh my God, we were talking to this girl. They're like, it was for sure a girl. And it was weird because she was totally answering questions for us. They're like, there was no doubt that she was answering questions we were asking.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, that's probably Emma. And they go, well, Emma mentioned another spirit, but just said to say hi to them. So we were like saying hi to them, but they weren't getting any response. And Emma was giggling. And I go, well, who is the other spirit? And they go, Emma said to say hi to Bruce. And I'm like, boo. I'm like, ooh, Twilight Zone. I'm like, well, I'm Bruce. And they're like, no wonder no spirit named Bruce came through. I'm like, and it kind of takes you aback, when some spirit says, oh, don't forget to say hi for me to Bruce. And it's like, oh,
that is
wow.
Fascinating. And you think about that. I mean, it really does demonstrate that this is an active intelligence. It's not just some hiccup of history. It's an active intelligence that's still there and still interacting with the present. And
oh yeah, and full sentences and all that. It's not like
wow.
There was an interaction, on the stage from someone doing, and she was just answering all kinds of questions to people. I was like, oh my God. Yeah, she was, and I had never experienced Emma before I went to Shufflin Hall, but people had told me that they'd experienced Emma at other locations, and she was just chatty Cathy. I mean, it's like pull her string and she will just talk, which is weird because normally you hear EVPs and, you see ghost shows on TV and they'll go, this is a Class A EVP, and it plays some garbly-gook where I'm listening and I'm like, I didn't hear that at all.
Right.
They're calling it a Class A EVP, but it sounds like a bunch of garbage to me.
Well, I've got to point this out since you kind of brought it up, but I think it's an interesting anomaly in that there are some things floating around the internet, and they kind of demonstrate what could be going on with some of these EVPs. Is that it's like usually it's a crowd noise or a crowd chant, and they have like 5 different sentences on the screen, and they're very different sentences. But if you're reading, as you're reading each individual sentence along with what you're hearing, you'd swear that that's what it's saying. Then it switches to an entirely different sentence, and you'll swear that that's what you're hearing as well. And so I think with these kind of sounds is that they're incredibly ambiguous, but getting a true, Class A EVP, you don't need the words. I mean, you're just going to pick it up,
Right. Yeah. And she is, of all the things I've ever seen anywhere of my life, she is the most conversational spirit I've ever seen. I mean, it's stunning, really. It really is stunning.
Yeah.
My wife is a 100% skeptic. So I'll go to one of the other haunted locations in town. My wife actually for Paracon wore around a shirt that said token skeptic on it. And, she had it made somewhere online, had it sent to her. We were at Wyatt Earp's Oriental one night, which is an active location. It certainly is. Mm-hmm. And we're in there, and this is shortly after pandemic. And when I mean shortly after pandemic, Tombstone opened up super fast, super fast. We were closed for, you ready for this? 3 weeks.
Wow. Well, you did it.
Never even had a mask mandate. And everybody was coming down here from Tucson and Phoenix and all. I mean, because no one up there could go anywhere. So they were all coming down here. Right. And we were at Wyatt Earp's. They left the bars closed a little longer unless you were serving food. And Wyatt Earp said, well, we have popcorn. And they said, no, that's not good enough. But we went right after they reopened and we were doing karaoke. And my wife was standing in the middle of the place and suddenly she goes, oh, my God. And I go, what? She goes, somebody just put their hand on my back. And I'm like, honey, you don't have anyone within 25 feet of you. And she's like, oh, yeah. Well, I'm like, do you have a little ghostly feel up there? And she goes, no, it must have been a muscle spasm. Oh. And I'm like, of course, because someone putting their hand on your back always feels like a painful muscle spasm. And then the very same night, we're talking about it and we're laughing and joking. And our friend who has a daughter who is extremely sensitive to the spirit world, like extremely sensitive. And the weird thing is, she's not trying to capitalize on it. She doesn't even like it. She doesn't even like this ability she has. But we're sitting there, and I'm running like an Ovilus type of thing going. And the entire night, I didn't get a single word on Ovilus. But finally a word comes through. It's one word, and it's that girl's name. And she has a pretty unusual name. I mean, it's not an unheard of name, but it's a pretty well unheard of name. So, you know, people that say, oh, you know, there's just a database of, nobody would have this in their database of names. It's just impossible.
Oh, cool.
And right after that came up, her daughter's name, something kicked her chair.
Ooh.
And you could hear the chair move on the floor, and she's sitting on the chair. And she's like, oh, and you know, and she's not like a paranormal investigator or anything. She's like, oh my God, what was that? And again, I'm like, there's no one within 20 feet of you. And everyone's all freaked out. My wife's like, you know, every time I do plans for Paracon, my wife's like, are you going to talk about that ghost crap again? and I'm like, I want to take her out on an investigation of Shufflin' Hall so bad it makes my eyes spin backwards. More than her eyes roll when I start talking about paranormal.
Now, do you do a lot of investigating yourself?
Only recently,
okay.
Since I've been in Tombstone. The experiences, and it wasn't the only one I had in Southern California, but they didn't come from investigations. Okay. They were not associated with investigations. And to me at the time, that's kind of what put more credence to them, right? Is like, we weren't looking for anything, yet weird stuff happened, you know?
Yeah.
It's not like we were trying to record ghosts or trying to see things. Things would just happen. And they happened, a couple of weird things happened a couple of times. But since I've been in Tombstone, I've been on quite a few.
Well, that's fantastic.
Quite a few.
Is there a lot of teams operating down there?
There is. We have a hometown team called Goose Flats Paranormal.
Okay.
And they actually did a thing at our last Paracon, which was fantastic. They did a ghost hunt 101 for kids.
Oh,
you know,
cool.
Why not to be scared of ghosts? You know, here's how we investigate. A newspaper from a town that's, a ways from us, but is a gigantic town compared to Tombstone. They did a whole write-up in the paper about it. They got rave reviews. And Brian and Bree, they did a fantastic job. And there are our own. Well, there was another team called Wild Night Paranormal, but I think he's been creating like a ghost bus that he's going to travel around the country in.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. So I haven't heard a lot about him lately, but Goose Flats Paranormal is the hometown team.
Okay. No, I think that's fantastic. And given such a location where it sounds like you could pretty much throw a stick in any direction and hit something paranormal, you got a lot of opportunity to choose from. You could. Yeah. And with that
you
much
might not
history,
have to throw that stick very far either.
I think that would be amazing. And that's why, if and when you do the next Paracon, I'm really going to try to have myself and at least part of my team make it, because it would be a phenomenal opportunity. I of course, like I said, I've been a fan of Tombstone forever, just through the movies. I mean, I don't claim to, and what little research I've done on the topic, but there's another place that comes up an awful lot in the stories about Tombstone, and that's Big Nose Kate's. What can you tell me about that?
So Big Nose Kate's used to be the Grand Hotel.
Okay.
And it completely burned down except for like the framework of the building and everything. But as everything happened in Tombstone, after there was 2 big fires in Tombstone, and within 6 months, like everything was completely rebuilt. Mm-hmm. And there is a story from Big Nose Kate's called the Swamper. The Swamper supposedly he was like a caretaker for the hotel. He lived in the basement, and it appears like he tunneled through his basement into some mine shafts. because like I said, there's mine shafts that run all over underneath the town.
Mm.
And, the question has always been, did he, get silver out of the mine? It's not as easy to say they got silver out of the mine because you got to get it out. You got to get it acid. You got to get it, it's got to be worked. It doesn't just come out like a piece of silver.
Oh, okay.
But, the thing was always, did he hide his treasure down there? But in the basement of Big Nose Kate's, which is a fantastic place. It's a great tourist restaurant. The walls are just coated with stuff about Tombstone. It's a very cool place.
Mm-hmm.
But where their gift shop is in what they call the shaft, which is downstairs. And people get all kinds of K2 readings down there. They get all kinds of Ovula stuff. They get all kinds of EVPs down there. And I don't know if the entity which is down there, which they all call the Swamper, I don't even know for sure if it's him. But there is a lot of activity down there.
Mm.
It's well known enough for that they have the story of the Swamper right on their menu.
Oh.
So when you figure out what you want to order, you can sit there and read the menu and it'll tell you all about it.
Yeah, and he sounds like he was kind of an odd character anyway, but isn't his room still available to go check out? I don't know if you can go in it, but you can go up to the doorway.
You can't go in it, but you can go in there and look, and you can see the hole through the floor that is purported to have gone into the mines. Yeah.
Wow, that's really incredible. Yeah, there's so much history. It's such an amazing location, and would you mind, Bruce, giving the listeners more information about the upcoming Paracon that'll be over there?
Absolutely. So this last year, we just completed it. We did it the 5th through the 7th of May. It was a rousing success. It was
wonderful.
We didn't have any problem getting people to come and speak. We had people that drove all the way from LA for gas money. They wanted to do Tombstone so badly. And this year, we're going to have it April 26th through 28th of 2024. We're already inviting vendors. If you go to tombstoneparacon.com, there's a website there. It's got a countdown for the next Paracon on it. We don't have the new logos up for next year's yet because we're working on those. But there is a vendor application area where if people want to be a vendor, if you want to promote your paranormal team or your podcast, or you've got paranormal goodies to sell, there is a vendor application. People always ask why we have an application and not just a form. And that's because we don't want to end up with 25 of the same thing.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
We don't want 25 mediums or something that, fortune tellers that are all going to do the same thing. We want it to be different. Not that we won't have more than one of different things, but we don't want to get into a thing where a whole row of people are all doing the same thing. That's not good for the vendors, and it's not good for the people coming in. But we will do it the 26th through the 28th of April of 2024. We're going to try and have tickets out. Don't hold me to this, but I'd really like to release tickets on like Halloween or something.
Oh, that'd be perfect. Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I'd like to do. Oh, and the Global Ghost Hunt is going to be doing locations down here. I don't know if you're familiar with Global Ghost Hunt.
No.
But I think it's globalghosthunt.com, and they do streaming events from all over the world.
Oh, cool.
And we have a very good relationship. They have an event that's coming up in October, but we have a huge event in Tombstone called El Dorado, so we can't do a streaming thing from here at that time.
Okay.
But they are going to stream a location, which is, I don't know if you've ever heard of this gentleman. Do you ever remember hearing about a gentleman named Emmett Kelly Jr.?
The name is familiar.
He was a clown.
Okay. I don't remember.
I know, right? It's like, he was a pretty famous clown back in the day, like, 60s, 70s, appeared at the White House and did all kinds of stuff.
Right.
He has a very haunted house in Tombstone that they're going to live stream an investigation from there for Global Ghost Hunt in December. And he actually wrote an article about it in the 60s. And, you know, in the 60s, if you said your house was haunted, everybody looked at you like you were crazy. You know, he wasn't doing it for publicity. He wasn't trying to make his way in the paranormal world, right? Because everyone just thought he was nuts.
Right.
But he wrote this thing about my haunted house on Skyline Drive, which, interestingly enough, I also live on Skyline Drive. I can see his house from where I'm sitting on my balcony right now.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, do you have activity?
Next year's Paracon is going to be absolutely fantastic. We learned a lot this last one. We had guys like Greg Lawson, the paranormal detective. He's flown as far as Romania to go to Paracons, and he said it ranked in his top 2 or 3 Paracons he'd ever been to.
Oh, fantastic.
Which is really high praise coming from a guy that every year goes to Michigan and all these other big Paracons and does a podcast with Dave Schrader and guys like that. And he just had nothing but good things to say. He was a super nice guy. If anyone's looking for guys to appear at a Paracon, he's a super nice guy. Super nice.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. Like I said, I will try to make that journey this next year as well. I think that it would be one to take advantage of, and not to mention that even if, you know, you don't do investigating, there's still so much amazing history and such an iconic moment in our American past that it's something that I think everybody should go see at least once.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you can ride in a real stagecoach. We've got 2 stagecoaches that go up and down Allen Street.
Wow.
We've got all these historic locations. We've got lots of original buildings. We've got the OK Corral. We've got Boot Hill Graveyard. We've got the Birdcage Theater. We've got a real 1880s silver mine that's open for tours, which, by the way, is also haunted. And they actually they have a dinner theater, a dinner in the mine that they do at the Tough Nut Mine, which is also haunted. And, you know, they sometimes do ghost stories in the mine and stuff like that. So even without a Paracon, there's plenty to see. And if you ever want to see about just stuff about Tombstone, discovertombstone.com or Discover Tombstone on Facebook will get you all the information you need to know, upcoming events, lists every business in town. It lists every event and attraction in town. And like I said, for the Paracon, on Facebook is Tombstone Wild West Paracon, and the web address is tombstoneparacon.com.
Fantastic. Well, Bruce, it's been an absolute pleasure having a chance to talk with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming on, and by all means, I hope you'll come back and we can have more of a discussion about this, because I find this absolutely compelling and fascinating, and it's a living history. This is a place of living history. So,
well, Tombstone is known that their moniker is Tombstone, the town too tough to die.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, everybody does at some point. So I think that's why we're as haunted as we are.
Well, thank you again, sir. I appreciate your time and for coming on the show.
Oh, you bet.
Get out. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us here on tonight's show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please feel free to follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Paranormal Portal Radio, as well as finding us on Twitter. We're on Twitter at Paranormal Portal, Portl, and we'd love to have you stop by our YouTube page and subscribe and check out our shows there. We got hundreds of shows, Journeys into the Paranormal Portal, so I hope you'll check it out, guys. We're over there at youtube.com/Paranormal Portal, so hope to see you guys soon. We'll be back, of course, for more podcasts in the coming days. So we love you all. Be good, be kind, be nice. Take care of each other. Help each other out. Find the magic in every day. And remember to laugh as much as you can.